The hymns to the sun. There are hymns, that is, religious psalms that were written, and Ikhnaton is put down as the author of these psalms. And they represent the idea of the universal God. Now, there is a picture of Aton. Aton is represented as the sun disk with arms stretching all the way out from east to west. That is, rays, and every ray has at the end a hand. So these are, it's like 35 arms are sticking out from the sun, from one end of the earth to the other. And in the hymn to the sun, he also speaks about the sun who rises at the extreme east and sets in the extreme west and shines over the whole earth. Look, once Egypt had Egyptians who were living abroad. Egyptians are living in Byblos, and it's a large Egyptian community. They have an Egyptian temple. They have Egyptians living abroad, and the Egyptians are saying, in effect, what's this meaning of Amun-Re, the god of Egypt who rules and shines over the Nile Valley and is represented by the king who is the God incarnate? Where do we stand? What is our place? Aren't we still Egyptians? In other words, the demand of Egyptians who were, on the one hand, living abroad, on the other hand, wealthy, but not members of the aristocracy. This is what their complaint was, and this is what started their revolution. And they demanded the change. And they demanded, we don't want the god Amun-Re, who is the god personified by the Pharaoh and in the Nile Valley. We want a God who shines on us too, not just on you who live on the banks of the Nile. And they forced him, I believe he was forced, to adopt the concept of the god Aton. What's the difference between Amun-Re and Aton? Depends on how you describe them. Aton was described as the God who shines over the whole earth from east to west. And by the way, the hymn to the sun is interesting because it's very close. It represents several psalms in the book of Psalms in the Bible. Psalm 19 and 104. Very interesting, almost identical descriptions in some of the lines. But it's clear that the god Aton now shines over all the world, and therefore Egyptians living in northern Canaan, or Egyptians living perhaps on the eastern shores of Africa, trading in ivory, or those living someplace in India, they can say, well, we're also part of it. We're all part of the whole thing. And I believe that he was forced into it, and therefore changed his name from Amenhotep to Ikhnaton. That was a change. It was a change from the one who is favorable to Amen to the one who is now favored by the god Aton. It seems that the Aton period, the flourishing of the Aton period, the lesser gods were kind of pushed aside. They're not eliminated, but they're pushed aside. But the hymns to the sun are written in such a fashion that you could say it's almost monotheistic. Okay, this, again, a difference in theory. I mean, first of all, I have a lot of conflict with Professor Breasted. Professor Breasted, by the way, wrote this book, The Dawn of Conscience, in which he tried to prove that Ikhnaton was the one who started monotheism and Moses got it from him, and it was all an Egyptian invention. Now, you know, I read that book and I can see the flaws in it. And one of the great flaws is Professor Breasted was still thinking in romantic 19th century concepts. This one man conceives of this idea, and he makes him the hero, basing everything on the Psalms, or the hymns to the sun. Why do I not think that Ikhnaton was the prophetic type? Because of what happens in the course of this period. First of all, why do we call it the Amarna period? When Ikhnaton founded the city of Ikhnaton, that city existed as the capital of Egypt for 17 years. But he didn't stay there. He left after a while. And that leaving Ikhnaton was a symbol of his abandonment of the ideals of the revolution. The place was abandoned, and abandoned for a long time, and it became essentially ruined because it was abandoned. In 1887, a peasant woman was digging in her garden and plowing the soil with a stick, and she found these clay tablets. In 1887, the peasants down there didn't know what these clay tablets were, until somebody said, you know, up in Cairo, these crazy people who come from England and France, they buy this stuff. So somebody dug, and they found something like 500 clay tablets. And they put them in a sack, and they dragged them 200 miles up to Cairo, in the process destroying about 200 of them. But anyway, we have 350 of these tablets. They turn out to be the most important tablets of that period, of this period, which is the reign of Amenhotep III and Amenhotep IV, which would be from about 1420 to 1360. That's the period I give to it, the Amarna age. Now, the place where these tablets were found was called Tel El Amarna, which means the ruin, which is in the territory of the Arab tribe of Amarna. That's all it means. The place was called Tel El Amarna. They found these tablets, they brought them up. Scholars began to study them. They turn out to be diplomatic correspondence of this period. All these letters, with few exceptions, are letters addressed to the pharaohs, Amenhotep III and Amenhotep IV, addressed to them from kings of Asia, kings of Palestine, Hittite country, Dushrata of Mitanni. All the areas are in correspondence with Pharaoh. And you draw your conclusions from these letters as to what was going on. And we see it was a mess in international relations at that time. All the letters are written in Babylonian. That was the international language at the time of correspondence. Egyptian scribes learned to read and write Babylonian. Now, in 1453, Thutmose III had conquered all of Western Asia and declared this is the Egyptian empire. 30 years later, it seems that Egypt is not controlling this area. The kings of Jerusalem and of Byblos and of a lot of other states are kings of small states, each one of them an independent king of a city and a small area around it, and there are many of them. And they write letters to Pharaoh and they say, why don't you help us defend your land? In other words, they're saying, yeah, this is all Egyptian territory. We acknowledge you as Pharaoh. We acknowledge you as our king. But we're being attacked, and Pharaoh is not helping us. Who's attacking us? A very interesting name appears, the Chabiru. Again, many scholars say, well, Chabiru is not Hebrew. Well, it is Hebrew. Chabiru is Ivri, written in Babylonian. The Hebrew letter ayin is not pronounced or written in Babylonian. They always use the symbol for cha in cuneiform, of course. So if it was Ivri, which has an ayin, then it's written Chabiru. In Egyptian, it's written with an ayin. So there we have it written ayin. And in Ugaritic, which is more closely related to biblical Hebrew, it's written with an ayin. So Chabiru are Hebrews. So who are these Hebrews? Well, you know, there's only one period in biblical history when the people of Israel are known always as Ha-Ivrim, the Hebrews. And when is that period? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Jacob, Abraham Ha-Ivri, always Abraham the Hebrew. When Joseph speaks to his Egyptian fellow prisoners, he says, Ganov gunavti be'eretz ha'ivrim. I was kidnapped from the land of the Ivrim. That's the period when the ancestors of Israel were known as Ivrim, the Chabriru. Now, what's Abraham got to do with the Amarna letters? Well, read the story of Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, 13, and 14. Abraham comes in with thousands of cattle and flocks and comes into the land of Canaan, and he's eating their grass. And in all of the wanderings of Abraham, he only goes into one city, and that's Shechem, and after that he's always between the cities, between Ai and Bethel, between this and that, and then around Beersheba and around Hebron. Abraham can't go into the Canaanite cities because they're defending themselves against him. But he eats their grass, makes himself at home. As he says to his nephew Lot in chapter 13, he says to Lot, why should we crowd each other, and your shepherds are fighting with mine, and after all we're brothers, why should we fight? Let's spread out. You look and take any part of the country you want, and I will take another part. And he said the land is open to wherever we want to, we can go. So he says, Im hasmol ve'emina, im hayamin ve'hasma'ila. If you want to go south, I'll go north. If you want to go north, I'll go south. And then Lot looks down and he goes down to Sodom, which is a very fertile country at the time. So the Hebrews are coming into the land of Canaan. And the Canaanite kings are annoyed and they are threatened. So they write to Pharaoh and they say, the Habiru are attacking us. And you know, Pharaoh, if you would just send 25 Egyptian soldiers with Egyptian flags and armor, it would scare these people. And you must send us, what's next? You must send us gold. We need money. So the letters are saying to Pharaoh, send us money, send us soldiers, send us protection. We are fighting for your land. They always say this. They still acknowledge Pharaoh as the ruler of Canaan, and Pharaoh's doing nothing. Why is Pharaoh doing nothing? Because the revolution in the capital of Egypt is tearing the country apart. He doesn't have troops to send abroad. He's got to control his own place. The letters of Tel el-Amarna reflect the patriarchal period. That is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, up to the time of Joseph. Joseph then reflects a different period of Egyptian history, which we'll get to. But this is the period of the Tel el-Amarna.